Welcome to Above and Below, the podcast of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. My name is Sonya Bohmann, and I am the Executive Director of CIASP and your co-host for today. Joining me again is Zulq Malik, our co-host, and Ted Ma. Zulq, I'm going to have you give your intro.
Oh, come on. At this point in time, everyone should know who I am. I'm Sonya's sidekick, so I know Sonya's going to bleep that out again. I'm a proud member, a board member of CISP. I've been in the construction ecosystem for about 30 years in different capacities, but as an owner, general contractor, and the owner of a subcontracting company. So happy to be here and continue the discussion around mental health and mental awareness and cultural changes, which is, I think, what we're going to be talking about with Ted about today. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm Ted Ma, leadership strategist, keynote speaker, and author, and I work with organizations to create a culture that people are proud to be a part of and empower leaders to become great mentors and help to build thriving organizations. So excited to be here with you all.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. So, we are going to talk about culture shifting and mentorship, but I thought it might be a good space for us to have Zulq kick us off and talk a little bit about what it means, mentorship in general, and then what it means to be a mentor.
Sure. I mean, I guess we can talk about mentorship. Mentorship means different things at different phases within the construction ecosystem. So we have a very defined and pronounced mentorship program through the apprenticeship and through the trades. So, the industry is very, defined when it comes to passing down technical knowledge over to trades workers and craft workers. We've also defined a slightly less rigorous mentorship program around people that are in the construction director role, teaching young project administrators and project engineers how to work their way up to the project management roles. But I'm hoping that today we're going to be able to frame the conversation is that, hey, listen, well, let's talk about the emotional mentorship that we're going to need.
Mhm.
It came up as a topic today with one of clients of ours who's also a friend of mine, where they're saying, hey, no one's ever groomed somebody in our industry to be a real leader,
Hmm?
right? It's taken for granted that you're a really good project manager and now you're the director of the department.
Yeah.
And guess what? Now you're going to have to deal no longer with the technical issues of running projects. You're dealing with the human elements of running a project, the people, right? So I know that we have a void, and I'm excited about what Ted is going to be able to bring to us today about the idea of this cultural revolution that's necessary to change us from a technical, physical side to a more emotional, leadership driven side.
Absolutely. So, thanks for joining us, Ted. Ted, when you and I met a while ago in a construction company, you really came to talk to our team about culture and mentorship and what that looks like, not just in a formal structure like Zulq was just mentioning, but that finding that person that can be your mentor or finding someone that you want to be your mentee. Is that the right? And right? So, talk a little bit about what that means and what it means to you personally as well.
It's an interesting concept that Zolk brought up as well, Sonia, in that mentoring, when it's part of a culture, it doesn't have to be defined by a structured mentoring program.
Right.
And you and I talked about that some years ago, that
Mhm.
informal mentorship can be as powerful and many times even more powerful than a formal mentoring program where somebody's assigned a mentor and a mentee, because a mentorship is a lot like dating, in the sense that sometimes things work out, sometimes relationships are longer or shorter than others, and it's really about compatibility. And so for me, that began early in my career when I was in my early 20s, and finding somebody that I respected, admired, had in my mind the character qualities that I wanted to emulate and was successful. And approaching that individual and seeing if I could get some of his time and if he was willing to give back and pour some of those lessons into me. And that's really what the foundation was for me, is starting that relationship, initiating the conversation. And so for those out there now who don't have a formal mentor, number one, that's okay. That's most people. And number two, you don't need a formal mentor. It could be an informal person that you touch base with time to time. But the key thing is identifying these potential candidates that you could ask and approaching them. And for me, Sonia, back to your other question, I certainly wouldn't be where I am today, both as a professional speaker, as a business owner, or even as a father and a husband, if it wasn't for mentors I've had in my life, both on the professional side as well as on the personal side.
So for both of you, I think this question kind of, as we all are, and I've been so lucky to have some really exceptional mentors in my career that I'm still in contact with today. But what does that dating process look like? As you mentioned, Ted, it's a little bit like dating. So what does that look like? How do you hone in on that person Or as a person who wants to maybe have a mentee, how does the relationship work that way as well? Or how has it worked for each of you in the past?
I'll let you start with it, Ted. I'll share. Happy to share mine afterwards.
Sure. Typically, Sonia, the conversation starts by making the ask and understanding for those who are seeking a mentor that much like in many areas of life and business, success sometimes is a numbers game. So if you're that person who says, I'm looking for somebody in my industry or even outside my industry that could serve as a mentor of mine, identify several candidates because potential mentors may be good-hearted people that want to teach and give back, but they just don't have the bandwidth and capacity. And on the flip hand side, for all my executives and business owners and mentors that are listening to this or watching, you can only effectively mentor a few people at the same time because of that same capacity. It's overwhelming. And Zulq, I don't know if you've had this experience in your decades in the industry where you try to mentor everybody and then you as a mentor get burned out because there's only so much you have to give. You've got to refill your own cup in order to pour into someone else's. And so once you identify those candidates, Sonya, for me was making the ask saying, hey, could we touch base, 15 minutes once a month? And even like my mentor currently, we meet once a quarter on Zoom for half an hour because he's an international speaker traveling all over the world as a Hall of Fame personality. Like, there's only so much time that he has. And so
Right.
starting with the small ask, letting the mentor know why you would like them to be in that role and what you are hoping to get out of the relationship, which means the duties on us as mentees is saying, not only why would I want this person like Zulq to be my mentor, but what do I want to get out of the relationship? What are my goals and what initiative can I take in terms of communication and meeting my mentor where they are with their schedule and their availability so that I can get the most out of this? Because if you don't go into the relationship with specific goals and it's kind of like, yeah, let's just meet up for coffee, let's have lunch, let's jump on Zoom,
Right.
and it's very superfluous, all of a sudden you're not going to get a lot out of the relationship and it's not a good investment of time on either end.
Yeah, but actually, well said, Ted. I think there's two sides. The construction ecosystem, as closed as it is actually very open in a lot of ways. In my experience of call it 30 years. Thanks for making me feel old, Ted. Um, I found that sometimes just reaching out and asking. There's a lot of things that I needed to learn. So I'm just going to use me as an example really quickly. I thought I knew everything. I was the smartest guy that walked the planet. Blah blah blah. Right, my ego was pretty high up there. And then I got into the construction ecosystem after I was working in the government. And my father, who I looked up to in some ways, awesome dad, he said to me, he goes, "Who's the least important person on a job site to me?" And I said, "I named everybody on the job site." And he goes, "No, son, you produce the least amount on the job site." And so I learned that he goes, "Listen, everyone has something to teach you, but if you're not open to learning, then it's pointless." So he goes, identify opportunities and gaps of what you want to learn, and then seek out people that can fill those gaps and voids for you. So that was a starting point for me where it was like, oh, wait a minute. I was going to one day wanted to own my own construction company, but I kind of knew basic plumbing, but I didn't know how to do plumbing. I didn't know how to do electrical. I didn't know how to do a whole bunch of things. So I set myself on a journey where it says, hey, if I want to see myself here in X number of days or years or weeks, I need to get those skill sets to get there. And in construction as a whole, and there's a lot of people that are going to be viewing, and a lot of them are going to be from the construction ecosystem, right? We think that we're going to inherently learn it because we're there. No, you actually have to intentionally go learn. And then you have to intentionally find mentors that you're going to connect to. And not everyone was worth connecting with. So I had some mentors. I was like, I can't believe I asked that guy for help. And then there's others where I was too shy to ask for help, and they were just like, "Oh my god, absolutely, I'm happy to show you this." And they'd be like, "Hey, this is how you do it." And it went from a technical thing to, by the way, this is how you teach people as well, and this is how you learn about nurturing workers. And a lot of the void that we have in our industries, we're too shy to ask, right? Because we feel like, oh, that person is really important. They're really busy because we assume that automatically that everyone's busy. Unfortunately, it'd be really cool if somebody's listening can create an app for mentor mentees in construction. You can figure out who gets swipe left, swipe right. But it would be so cool to have where people can say, hey, listen, how do I connect with this ecosystem? But as a little hint for everybody else, there's this thing called LinkedIn now.
Right.
It's the ultimate swiping left and right where you can connect with people anonymously. And then it's up to you to forge a relationship. So I have the opportunity, Ted, you're obviously a far more prolific speaker than I am. I speak to university students every year and I'll say, hey guys, my LinkedIn account, here it is. Happy to share it with you. And I will reach out to you if you reach out to me, but don't expect a reply right away. I am busy, right? So I set the expectations. And I can tell you there is a persona and a profile of the individuals that reach out. And in a very short period of time, their careers are accelerating. Whereas all those that were too shy to take a thing, you find out a year later they're still looking for a job or they're still looking for an opportunity and they're a little late to the game. So reach out. That's what I did.
So, Zulq, let's talk about that because in the construction industry, we know that there is, you talked about that, but we also know that there's that tough, stoic, I can do this on my own mentality,
Yeah.
which I would feel like is a barrier to being able to bridge that gap. And if we were to relate this back to what we talk about a lot in construction mental health or
Hundred.
construction suicide prevention, and we think about Joiner's interpersonal theory of suicide, there's that one bubble or piece of that interpersonal theory that talks about that thwarted belongingness or those feelings that you're alone. And I want to have you both talk about this from different angles. Zulq, obviously you can talk about the different pieces from the construction ecosystem side, but Ted, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can create that connectiveness through mentorship from a community standpoint. And then, Zulq, I'd want the lens from you maybe to look at from that leadership because you've been in that leadership role is there's a lot of loneliness in that role. And then from the craft worker side, there's a lot of isolation potentially in that role. And how do we use mentorship to balance both of those pieces of the conversation? So, Ted, I'm going to have you start out and talk a little bit about how that connectiveness can happen and really how it draws people back to that community feeling.
Sonya, one of the things you brought up in your question is the mindset of, I can do this myself.
Right?
And many of us A-type personalities, and even though I'm not in the construction industry, I share that. We're go-getters,
Yep.
we're ambitious, and we have this knack for being able to do things on our own. The reality that I've come to realize is that you're going to accomplish the level of success that you have up to this point in your career based on your previous and current knowledge. But to get to that next level, and Zulq alluded to this, you need to have that other perspective. Let me give you a quick example of that. I was privileged a few years ago to speak at a conference with Magic Johnson, and I'm sure all of our listeners are familiar with Magic.
Not all of them.
Hall of Famer.
The young guys
On
know.
the business side, aside from his basketball accolades, over 10,000 employees, and this is a few years ago when I had a chance to hear him speak at over 10,000 employees working for his companies, tremendous philanthropic efforts, received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, billions of dollars of sales, and on. And I had the privilege of having a quick conversation with him at the conference and asking him about his mentors. And what was interesting, Sonya, is he told me about his mentors when he was coming up through the basketball world and his Hall of Fame career. And he told me about his mentors in the business world, not only in the past when he was transitioning from athlete to business person, but also currently. Now, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. If Magic Johnson has always had and currently has mentors, who are we in our own right to say, well, no, I don't need that. And if so, then maybe we need to take a look in the mirror and say, do we want to go beyond where we are today? Or are we just stuck in our comfort zone and we like being the smartest, most experienced person in the room instead of getting into either a different room or a different circle that challenges us? So to bring it full circle, and that was kind of an aside there, in terms of the connectivity, mentorship is built on relationships. And the beautiful thing for those that are in a leadership role, because every mentor is a leader, but not every leader is a mentor. And what we found through our research, and we surveyed over 3,000 professionals across the country in all different industries, is that the best leaders are great mentors. So when leaders decide to step into the role of becoming a mentor and they build this foundation of this relationship will drive more engagement. Engagement increases performance. But it starts with us making that investment, making that connection, being willing to carve out some time outside of just the typical performance reviews or annual meetings that we have to really find out about the person, the human element that you're talking about, the relational and emotional side, not just the box that we need to check.
Yep.
Yes.
That's it. That was awesome, Ted. I know all of my questions, Sonya. I lost track of which. I got excited about Magic Johnson.
I know you got so enthralled in what.
I kind of stopped watching basketball because of Iverson. So I remember the dynasty era, and you know, between him, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and them, like that was my era of basketball. And after that, I'm like, Iverson came along, I'm done. So what was
So
my
my
question?
claim to basketball fame, and the only thing I know about basketball is that I did once meet him in a Houlihan's right outside of Philadelphia. Allen Iverson, not Magic Johnson.
Oh, okay. So
Wait,
he ruined.
no,
I can say this
no.
publicly because I don't care. He doesn't owe me anything. He kind of ruined the sport for me by bringing his snotty attitude, right?
Well, he was yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation that we'll get into and how people
And we have that
that
conversation.
could be its own whole podcast, how we idolize sports figures in the world. However,
Yeah.
my question to you, Zulq, was talking about how at the top of leadership,
Yeah.
whether it's construction or any other industry, is that feeling of having to carry all of this on your own and that you don't have anyone that you can share with. So you're isolated in that respect. And then the travel aspects of that happen in construction where you're sometimes isolated on a job site and what that community connection and mentorship would do to counteract those pieces of the conversation around that throttled belongingness.
So, I think there's two pieces of this puzzle, right, Sonya? Is there's an element of isolation at the top of end of the leadership structure, right? And they say it's lonely at the top, tend to eat a little bit better, but it's lonely at the top. However, you're never really alone at the top because there's other people that are on other tops, right? And there's a lot of organizations that we're part of and that you're aware of and stuff like that, where they try to create this camaraderie, where it's a fraternity or a sorority of people that what they have an opportunity to engage and talk. And I think what sometimes we don't take advantage of is that emotionally I'm alone.
Right.
Physically, I might be surrounded by a bunch of people. And if I don't emotionally connect with other human beings about my emotional challenges in my day-to-day role, I'm going to have this issue. Right. And then what happens is you get isolated more. You put yourself tighter because you really feel you can't talk to people. So I've run a construction company. You can call it successful. I'm currently running a technology company, which some people say is successful. I'm still to measure it. And I feel like sometimes it's all the weight on my shoulders or all by myself.
Right.
But in actuality, I do have a really awesome network. I know, Sonya, I've talked to you about my bromances and all these other people that are in my universe. Yeah, Ted's laughing because I do have bromances. We talk to each other, right? And sometimes we're not necessarily looking for an answer. We just want to talk.
Mm-hmm.
We want someone to hear that I have issues today. And my issues are usually something that's just pent up in me, right? So find this ecosystem of friends, reach out to other people. Somebody who started off as a board advisor for us was just strictly a mentor role. He came from a very astute multidisciplinary consulting firm, and now he's joined our company. Sonia, have you met Rowan from our team?
I haven't.
I met him while I was hopped up on Percocets on my way back. Listen, this is after surgery. I was having nerve pain where we couldn't figure out why I was having extreme nerve pain in my left leg. I couldn't even wear shorts. That's how much my leg would hurt from the nerve pain. And I was getting a treatment done in California of all places. So I'm flying from Toronto to LA to get my medical procedure. And on the way back, I don't know why I had a connecting flight through Denver. Probably because I just wanted to get home earlier. And I'm connecting through Denver, which I never ever do connecting flights because if I don't have to, I won't do a connecting flight. And on the plane beside me is a gentleman who was sitting there and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I looked at him and I said, "Drugs will make it better. I'm feeling good today." And Sonya doesn't want to hear it. But yeah, I was taking medication to deal with a post-surgery procedure. And I said, so we just started talking. And he goes, "Do you need anything?" And I'm like, "No, I'm actually okay." I'm like, the drugs are going to kick in about 20 minutes. I'm going to knock out. And I go, "If I drool on you, just please apologize." But he took the chance to just ask me if I was okay. 30 minutes into the flight, I'm feeling better. I'm actually getting a little bit, hyper with my drugs. And I said to him, I said, "Oh, I really appreciate you just asking me how I was doing." That made the world for me. And turned out that he used to work for a company that they were involved with technology implementation for Fortune 500 companies. And I'd say, "Hey, I have a problem. I've got customers that are a void from technology." So I started asking him questions. And he was kind enough to answer. I'm like, okay, well, he asked me how I was doing, so he must be okay to answer my questions. And he did. And then as we're departing the plane, he's like, "Listen, if you ever want to stay connected, I'm happy to reach out to you, right? And stay in touch with you." I'm like, here's my business card. And he goes, "I don't have one with me, but I'll send you my LinkedIn profile." So he sends me his LinkedIn profile. I look at it. I'm going to say the name, Boston Consulting Group. I'm like, yeah, right. I can't afford to talk to you. And I just said, that was the reason. And so me, who is very confident about asking for help, was scared because he worked at Boston Consulting Group. So doesn't he reach out 30 days later and say, "Hey, listen, I didn't hear from you. Do you want to book some time with my assistant?" And it happened. So I'm going to say to anyone that's listening, Leaders, just ask somebody else. They're probably willing to talk to you. They're probably in the same predicament. And for those that are aspiring to come up in the roles, you got to identify. First of all, you need to know what you're missing. And on the emotional side, there's mentors everywhere because nobody in our industry wants to see somebody suffer emotionally, right? So as big as tough as we are, we're full of grit and we're full of like machismo and bravado. If I know you're hurting, my job is to make you hurt less. That's just how we are. It's ingrained with us because a lot of craft workers, they're used to working in crews. Very few work alone. So they know this idea of teamwork and crew work. The last thing they want to see is their crew fall off, their person fall off. Now, if they suck at their craft, they want them off. But if you're hurting emotionally, they're going to fall off. So ask, I'm not feeling good today. Can I just talk to you? If he says no, ask the next person. And I think Magic Johnson's a great example. If anyone knows his story, he went to Starbucks and said, by the way, I want to bring Starbucks into East LA. And Starbucks said, are you kidding? They're not our demographics. I guarantee you that didn't happen on the first phone call. That didn't happen on the second phone call. That didn't happen on the third phone call. He sold it back to Starbucks for some stupid millions of dollars later on. So as a professional athlete, recognized world player, was rejected more than once. If it's a trade worker, be prepared to be rejected at least once or twice or three times, right? It's not going to hurt you.
That gives me another kind of thought in this conversation that I want to bring up is that we're talking a lot about mentorship in the context of how it helps the individual. But I think the way we started this conversation talked a little bit about culture and companies and how does mentorship affect a company?
Great question.
Sonya, I'll pick that one up because it's something that I spend a lot of time working with organizations on. And what's interesting is if you look at so many of the key metrics from retention and employee loyalty to how engaged people are at work to how productive and what their performance is, all these metrics increase when there's a mentoring relationship. And here's the beautiful thing, and that's encouraging for all the company owners or senior executives watching this. It can have to be a formal structured program that you create as long as you're intentional. And you're going to hear this word several times, I'm sure, throughout the conversation between the three of us, is being intentional at the top of infusing this within your culture. Because what happens is when people are engaged in a mentoring relationship, 91% of people said that they're happier at work. They're 5 times more likely to be promoted. And so you start looking at when we did our national survey, what we found, and this was over a 3-year period and a few thousand people, is that employees said the number one reason that they stay at work as a result of a mentoring relationship. That was the number one benefit of
Not money.
is increase in
Not money.
loyalty to their company. So if you're looking at turnover, and I know the construction industry has that challenge that most industries do, well, how do we create more loyalty? How do we create this longevity and more retention? Well, it's developing these relationships, even if it's on an informal basis.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to that culture piece, right? Zulq, I think you could talk to that a little bit.
Listen, at the end of the day, the industry, we look at the large Coca-Colas of the world and all these other large entities, and we look at their structure and we look at all that. But when you look in the construction ecosystem, 95% of the industry is made up of small, medium enterprise that are usually family-run businesses. And unfortunately, not everyone's had a chance to go to some Ivy League school to grab this and say, oh, I'm going to put my MBA program on. It's actually, you do mentoring every day. You don't even realize it, right? But, what sometimes you have to sit there and say, while cultures can be undefined, you need to step away sometimes and say, well, how does my culture look, and do an audit of my company, what the culture's like. And if anyone's been in that, I want to transition my business to a next generation, you better have an audit plan in place, because if you're leaving your crappy culture behind, I guarantee your kids don't want to pick it up and take it on, right? They're just happy to get the money from you. Secondly, is that if you want to grow your people, especially in 2025, where the world is more transient than ever before, okay, you need to create a culture where people want to come to you. And you're not going to create that culture if you're not making yourself as a leader available to others. And leadership is not about you get the biggest paycheck or you get the closest parking spot. Leadership is to say, hey, I want to make myself available to you to help you with your challenges that you're having. I think Sonya, everyone laughs at me. Ted, you're going to laugh. My official title is Chief Happiness Officer, right? And people said to me, why did you pick that as a title? And I'm like, I have the hardest job. I got to keep everyone bridged together so that they're happy at work and I get their optimal performance. right? I physically don't do a lot of output myself, right? My job is to keep them all engaged and keep them happy. So if that means donuts or like coffee or popping by and giving them a pat on the back or say, hey, what's wrong today? Right? That's my job. And that's where I see leadership in construction. There's a lot of great-hearted individuals that sometimes if you didn't do an audit of your culture, do one. It's going to help you. And secondly, are you prepared for the next gen of your company? Because these younger people that are entering the workforce that we call powder puffs, they want mentors. I said it. All right. I said it. Ted's going, yeah, you're right.
No, he's not.
Yeah, he is. Inside his inner voice is saying it. Uh, this world, people want to connect with humans. It's a thing we have. We want an experience. We're looking for that opportunity and that experience, right? And we want to get it from people that we want to admire and respect. And we won't respect or admire you if you're not taking an interest in the younger generation. It's as simple as it gets. That's why we have an apprenticeship problem.
So, speaking of culture, and I know Zulq touched a lot on that, but Ted, you've got I just read it on your LinkedIn, a great quote about culture and really where it's created. Do you want to share that with us? Do you know what I'm
Sure,
talking
you're
about?
supposed to referring to.
I believe it was culture is not built in meetings, but in moments,
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well said. Love it.
right?
It absolutely is. And Zulk's example, when he was on the plane, and the person who took the moment to take an interest in him, even though there wasn't a working relationship, it really illustrates that, right? In that when we can be intentional about creating these moments of interaction, I call them everyday mentorship moments, where we simply use daily interactions to positively shift people's thinking and behavior. That's all the seatmate that Zulk sat next to did for him, and that's what he's talking about in as a leader, making yourself available and being interested and investing in your team, not just financially, but in getting to know them and investing time and energy into who they are as a human being, not just as a cog in the machine, for example. And so when we design those moments, and it starts with our thought process because it starts at the leadership level, and let me remind all of us, no matter how long you've been in the construction industry, you're perfectly positioned to help the person that you once were.
Oh, absolutely.
Full stop. So you don't need a certain title to step into the role of a mentor. You don't need a certain title to make culture better. And really, culture is everyone's responsibility. It's one of the misnomers. People think, well, culture starts at the executive level. The senior management needs to handle that. No, culture is built by these everyday micro interactions, these micro connections, these micro investments that we all decide to make so that we're proud to work in. That's what my life's work is about, is how do we create cultures where people go to work and say, I'm proud to be a part of this company. And we've all done business, whether it's with people in our industry or others, and you could tell like there's a sense of pride of working at that location. And why is that? It's because of the intention that starts as with leadership, but it permeates through the entire organization.
Well said. Yeah. I think people lose sight of the fact. Sorry, I know you want to say something, Sonia, but you've got a financial investment into your people, your peers. Imagine what you complement that with an emotional investment. And once you do that, the dividends come out bigger, better, stronger. And the dividends don't have to be money. The dividends could be just the general subculture in your workforce. And it just takes a small percentage of emotional investment and it just flips the script and it changes the culture in your organization. So
Sonya, can I piggyback on that for a moment?
You absolutely can. Yeah.
You mentioned in our previous conversation about culture of caring. And let me give you an example because we can highlight some great examples of doing it right. And sometimes we see the headlines of companies doing it wrong. But just this week, somebody who works for myself, my wife, and our home part time, she has another full time job that she works. And she sent us a text message and said, I am not going to be in the other job in case you're looking for me today because my great grandmother passed away. And so obviously I text her back expressing my condolences and just trying to reach out. And then I followed up the next day and said like, hey, how are you doing?
yep.
And are you feeling up to working your next shift? And if not, just let us know because we understand that sometimes you need the time to grieve and have that personal time. And she responded and said, I'm so appreciative that even though I work for you part-time, that you thought enough to ask because my full-time employer, when I informed them that I had a family member pass away, they said not one word to me when I went in.
That's unfortunate.
As a result, I filed my resignation today in that other company. So how simple is that? just to care about another human being. It's very easy to do, but once again, we as professionals, as leaders, we have to make that choice instead of doing what I've done in my own career, making the mistake and failing forward, of focusing so much on the results that I neglect the human being in the relationship.
Thanks for sharing that, Ted. I think we lose sight of the fact that we're humans, and we have a human side of us that has this emotional need and caring, right? And craving for it. We have a word of the year for each of us at the board level. I know Sonya's word is intentionality, so I'll share it with her. That she puts intention behind all of her actions and everything else. Is there a word that you have that you maybe have adopted for the year that gives you path and direction?
Zulq, it's kind of ironic you mentioned that. And for all of our listeners, we have not had this conversation ahead of time. So this is not pre planned. But the word that I'm focused on right now is intention. And the reason why is not just because that's Sonya's focus.
You stole that. I'm telling you, you stole it from Sonya. You can clip it out. I don't.
Copyright infringement. But it's because for organizations and leaders to create this culture that people are proud to be a part of, their people perform at their best, that they want to show up for work, that they stay long term. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. And so it starts with intention. So that's beautiful irony and confluence that we actually have the same focus word.
Awesome. Awesome. So my word of the year, it's actually been my word of the year for since my daughter's been born. And she's going on to 8.5 right now, but closing in on 9, and I think she's 17 personally. But I'm grateful. I exercise gratefulness in everything that happens in my universe. I tend to wake up in the morning, and go, hey, I'm grateful to be awake today, because hey, anything can happen. Not 15 anymore. But I think that sometimes when we don't exercise gratefulness, it actually kind of changes our subculture a little bit at work too. So if we're all grateful, we walk in. I come in with a grateful attitude. I'm the son of an immigrant. I live a pretty decent life. I'm grateful for all I have, because there's opportunities where maybe they wouldn't have presented themselves to me and I couldn't take avail of them. Also, there's a higher power that I'm appreciative of that has given me direction and guided the path after I've gone ahead and done stuff. So on behalf of CISP, as part of a board member, I really appreciate you taking out the time out of your busy life, Ted. I know you're on a circuit, you do what you do. Really appreciate you being here today with us and sharing your insights. And if there's anything I can impart with any of us that are listening today, is that there's a lot of opportunity to influence culture. And I think Ted said it, it's not a person's responsibility, it's a collective responsibility. And I don't know, as a leader of any company, where I would say to someone, I don't want you to permeate with positive culture. Negative culture, absolutely. I'm going to stop you in your tracks, right? But if you're bringing something positive to the equation, do it. Because guess what? That's how the revolutions and the evolutions within a company happen. So, all right.
That sounds good, Zulq. I appreciate the invitation to be a part of this. And I did want to share a resource with your listeners, which is our white paper called Everyday Mentorship. And it's a free resource that we can put the link in the show notes. And it actually talks about what are the traits of great mentors. And based on this national research that we did in partnership with the University of Northern Colorado, we identified 6 key traits that make a great mentor. And in the white paper, we not only discuss the traits, but how you can execute on them. And then it's wrapped up with 31 ways that you can practice everyday mentorship in a few minutes a day, because the biggest barrier that holds a lot of people back from stepping into the role of being a mentor, even if it's informal, is the barrier of time. But when you can see these different ways and how you can fit this into small chunks of time in your schedule, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming, people start to realize, oh yeah, it's just a slight shift in my mindset and a subtle shift in my focus and intention, and I can incorporate this effectively to make a bigger impact on my team members or those that I'm working with and leading. So I'm happy to share that resource with everybody. I hope it's valuable to you all. And as Zulq mentioned before, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Please reach out. Love to connect with you and stay in touch there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ted. And you have yourself a wonderful day. I know you still got a few hours to go the rest of your afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Zulq. Catch you later.